We are looking at number 9 in a series of views of things around Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Not necessarily right in the town, but more or less around the periphery, around the edges of the town, so to speak. And we're going to see things that, well, some of which are still here and some of which are gone. We'll see a general store, a brickworks. We'll see some mine entrances. And we'll see a fellow who was a clockmaker, Jacob Hugus, who, in addition to becoming a clockmaker, he was a very inventive character. And he set up the first steam mill west of the Allegheny Mountains. That was in 1822. And to move things along, I'm going to go to look at things one by one, if we can do that. This was a, actually let's talk about what it is. It's a tavern called the White Horse Tavern on Mount Pleasant Street going out of Greensburg. And it was once upon a time a general store. You can track it back to at least 1867. That's the view. This is looking back toward where Mount Pleasant Street intersects with Highland Avenue. And this shows that the place was there in 1867 when this map was made. You see E. Sell, that was Eli Sell. Eli Sell and his son John Sell ran that store and moved it into where Nature's Way now sits. And there's a road that is still there called Sell Lane, S-E-L-L. Let's just look at the area from the air. This is a place that used to be a general store and is now a tavern. And this is where the general store moved to, which is now Nature's Way. You see, it's called Paradise Village Shops. This area used to be called Paradise. And the Sell family also, once upon a time, had a farm right up north of there. This is where the general store was. And on that farm, they had a brickworks. They were making bricks, probably a lot of which are still in town and buildings that are built. This is what an old country brickworks used to look like. We go back to this area. This is where the general store was. Out here on Mount Pleasant Road, we see these little symbols. What they indicate are the entrances to coal mines. There were coal mines out there. And it should be no surprise that in not too short a time, Keystone Coal and Coke saw them and bought into them. They bought them up and ran the mines out there. This down here is where Keystone Coal and Coke had their first significant operation, Keystone number 1. Now we're looking at that same area. This building right here is where the general store was. And we'll kick this up a few notches. This was the general store. This is now Mount Pleasant Street. And down behind there was a mine shaft. This is 1929. And by that time, the mine shaft was abandoned. This was the general store. This is where the general store moved to, now Nature's Way. And this mapping, 1903, shows a building that was then used to generate electricity. Electricity was once generated to keep the town of Greensburg lit up. right there. That's that building in the 1960s. It had no longer been used for electrical generation, but other matters. And you can see that building present tense. It's still there. And I bet that the people who live there, or work there rather, have no idea that that was once an electric generating station. This is 1901. This shows the building belching forth huge amounts of black smoke because they had boilers there to generate the steam that moved the steam engines that turned the dynamos or generators that made electricity. This is the building that we were just looking at, where electricity was once generated to light up the town of Greensburg. And behind that building was one time a mine shaft. This over here is what's now Nature's Way. But this mine shaft generated a lot of coal, which kept these boilers going, which helped generate electricity. Talking about mine entrances, we're looking up now at an area up here, but just to orient you, this over here is the area where we were just looking at, where the Southwest Branch comes down, Mount Pleasant Street comes out, and right up here also were mine shafts. Not shafts, actually, they were drift entrances. I was told this by people who grew up around here, who remembered when they were kids, there were mine entrances in here. And now there are houses built in that area. But the thing I really want to point out here is right here. There was, in the early days, starting in 1822, a grist mill operated by steam, and it was the first one west of the Alleghenies. So we're told by Vogel and Winsheimer in the Centennial History of Greensburg. This shows it on an old map, 1867 map. Prior to that, in 1822, Jacob Hugus set up the first steam mill west of the Allegheny Mountains, SG Mill, steam grist mill. By this time it was owned by Kistler, but Hugus had owned it previously. Hugus was a clockmaker, appearing first in Greensburg on Pittsburgh Street at the corner of Pennsylvania. He made clocks and repaired clocks. This is one of the clocks that he made, right here. This is an advertisement, 1799. Also in 1799, he was one of the assistant burgesses of the town of Greensburg. And on a contemporary map, this shows where Jacob Hugus set up the first steam mill west of the Allegheny Mountains in 1822. That was his farm, more or less. And he died there in 1835. And being in the business of grinding grain, he would take 1 grain in 10 as the cost of grinding. And what he did with that grain was convert it into liquor. And what you'll also notice is that when he died in 1835, he still had his clockmaking tools, in addition to a lot of other stuff. He was a very inventive character. You might notice the blacksmith tools. He did a lot of things. And I just point him out because he's one of those really interesting, inventive characters that is just totally forgotten. And I just want to make some memory of him. And it's time to shut this one down and say so long till the next time. Bye.